Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I hope everybody's enjoying this almost fall weather. We're almost there, and where I live, of course, I am gearing up for the peak of the mushroom harvest season. Lots of mushrooms come up in the spring and summer. You know, we get the morels, especially in the spring, and then there's some good summer mushrooms. But September through November is like peak mushroom season for me. And I get out all my field guides. I go through them. Everything. If there's some videos, there's some good mushroom ID apps I've been looking at. I've never really used one before in the woods, so that'd be interesting. Of course, I don't really, in the national forest where I live, I don't really get cell coverage, basically at all. And only if I can access some kind of public Wi-Fi can I use something like that. But there are a couple that have some resources you can use offline. So I'm interested in exploring that. But basically, in the next few months, the plan, you know how plans go. They say if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, and that's for sure. Will be to harvest really hundreds of pounds of mushrooms and either dry them or cook them and freeze them and have them throughout the year. We've got everything from, wow, chicken of the woods, where you can go out and harvest like 100 pounds in a day. It's just crazy. Hen of the woods or maitake, same kind of thing. Cauliflower mushroom. Bear's head or lion's mane, a really great medicinal mushroom that's pretty common up here in the mountains, and it's one I'm going to really be looking for. We have shiitakes that grow up here. Oyster mushrooms, of course, and oysters are basically year-round. Reishi's, turkey tails, again, year-round. Gosh, there's so many, all kinds of boletes. Just yesterday, I found some beautiful boletes and had a little trouble identifying because they're actually a little harder to identify than other mushrooms, both your polypores, which are the mushrooms that grow on trees, and your boletes. But the thing is, there are very few poisonous varieties, especially in my region. There are like 2 or 3 poisonous boletes, and basically, I don't think there are any poisonous polypores. Those are the ones that grow on trees, but there are some that can cause stomach upset and indigestion. They're just not digestible. And of course, some that aren't digestible are very valuable medicinal mushrooms, such as turkey tail, and I'll be gathering plenty of those. But yeah, the oysters will be out in full. Wow, so many. I couldn't even begin to list all of the incredible mushrooms that I'll be looking for and trying to harvest over the next few months. And this is, I forage and or hunt and fish pretty much every season of the year, and this is like my mushroom season. Okay, now it is technically deer season in North Carolina. As far as I'm concerned, it's still too hot for hunting. I care about the quality of the meat. I'm not a trophy hunter. It's still plenty good weather for fishing, so I'll probably try to get some more trout fish again. I know I will between now and the first freeze. And of course, you can fish for trout any time of year, but it can be pretty darn cold in the rivers with snow and ice. So, it's more of a spring, summer, early fall thing for me. And then this, in the spring, and we'll talk about a few plants from the spring forage and cookbook here in just a minute. I'm looking for the green wild edibles, and the morels, obviously the morels as well. That's a big harvest for us around here, and they're absolutely incredible. Summer, there's certain things I'm looking for. I'm looking for a lot of fruits, a lot of blueberries and blackberries and strawberries and all that good stuff. The few gooseberries that the state hasn't destroyed, if I can find a few of those, pawpaws, and that's more of our fruit time. And then, of course, in fall, of course, we're coming into apple season as well. So I'm going to be picking a lot of apples. But mushroom harvest, it's like just like there's a deer season, just like there's an apple season. For me, there's a mushroom season. So I get really excited about it. I really do. And if you want to check out some pretty good videos on YouTube, there's a lady who calls herself Yellow Eleanor. She's out on the West Coast. I think maybe up Washington State or Oregon. Climate like identical to where I live in the mountains of North Carolina. So I really enjoy her channel, actually. And she does some really good videos. Does a lot to kind of demystify mushroom hunting, make it accessible to everybody. And, you can watch her videos and you'll learn a few mushrooms that you can identify. I mean, obviously an easy one that's probably more of a summer mushroom, maybe still around where you live, I don't know, is a giant puffball. I mean, this is a big, white, round, soccer ball shaped mushroom that's going to grow out in a field. Perfectly edible, delicious, mild flavored. You can pick 2 or 3 of those and you got enough to last for, I don't even know how long. I mean, it's just huge, Another one that's really common in my area is wood ears. Wood ears are available all year round. If you've ever gone to a Chinese restaurant and had those little black mushrooms in your soup, those are wood ears. There's just so many, and it's really fun. This is actually how I got into foraging and herbalism. I started out hunting mushrooms. I got a field guide from the library. It was Audubon Field Guide to Mushrooms in North America, and just went out in the woods and started learning about mushrooms. And then I thought, well, if they're wild edible mushrooms, they're probably wild edible plants as well. So I got a field guide to plants. And then, I met the Hicks family and learned all about wild crafting herbs and really, foraging for survival in the way they did. And so this is this is something I've enjoyed since I was like 10 years old. So I mean, I'm excited as a kid on Christmas morning to think that I get to go out in the foggy, rainy, chilly fall woods of the Appalachians looking for mushrooms. There are very few things that I enjoy more. And I love cooking with mushrooms. Maybe we'll get into some good mushroom recipes here over the next few months. But right now, we're still working through my book, The Spring Foraging Guide, and we got a couple plants this time. The first one's still very much around, very much in flower. You can absolutely look for it and find it. Honeysuckle. If you're a kid, you grew up around honeysuckle, you probably remember picking the flowers and sucking the little nectar out of them. That's what you're looking for when you're talking about eating honeysuckle. Now, honeysuckle actually is medicinal. It has some antiviral properties. So we've talked about that in other of my books. We'll talk about it again, but it's a very good herb to grow. Honeysuckle vines make incredible baskets. It's what the Cherokee are known for. There's beautiful baskets, very delicate work, very time consuming. But as a food, honestly, I had not really thought about eating honeysuckle. And then a friend of mine said, by the way, have you ever made honeysuckle syrup? And we discussed it, and it's just like making dandelion wine. You just take those blossoms and make sure you clean, get all the bits like plant matter off there, just those nice sweet blossoms, and boil them in water with sugar, and you can make an incredible honeysuckle syrup that is like really fine honey. Or you can make honeysuckle wine, and it's really very, very nice. Of course, they're edible flowers. You can just throw them on salads or use them as a garnish. But I think that, that scent of honeysuckle is just so incredible. And this is how you can have it in a jelly. You can make a jelly out of it, and have it, add pectins to the syrup essentially. But you can use it to flavor other ciders. It's very nice, actually. And I remember a while back, someone was trying to make a honeysuckle moonshine, and they were just fermenting their corn mash with honeysuckle blossoms. And I think they did, was it honeysuckle and rice or honeysuckle and corn? I cannot remember. But anyway, apparently it turned out fantastic. Now I could see that definitely. You distill it off. It's illegal. Don't. Even though recently a federal court, has ruled that Americans do have a constitutional right to make their own whiskey at home. The federal laws have not changed yet, so I'm not going to recommend you do it. I don't want to see you go to jail like my old friend Popcorn Sutton. If you ever watched the program Moonshiners, you may remember Popcorn. They did a documentary about him. He was a good friend of mine. Met him when I was about 16, and for some reason he just took a liking to me, as we say. And crazy, little skinny guy, more beard and hair than he had body weight. Probably was drinking about a half gallon of liquor a day, and a little bit of a pothead too, He was a, kind of a volatile little hillbilly, but I liked him a lot. He was a good, loyal friend. And when he got famous through the Moonshiners program, basically he was set up on a illegal gun charge. He made the cops look bad, that he was breaking the law right under their nose. Well, they were actually buying from him most of the time. I mean, they were not enforcing that law for a reason. That's part of the mountain culture. But when he got famous and they ended up looking bad, the way I heard it, and I could be wrong, someone set him up with an illegal gun. Mountain people usually trade guns just like you would money. Of course, that's not legal anymore. It's a barter system. Well, this turned out to be, I think, a stolen weapon. And he was sentenced to hard time in a penitentiary, and he shot himself. He blew his brains out. And his body would not have been able to handle the alcohol withdrawal. It would have killed him. So say a prayer for Popcorn Sutton. He deserved a whole lot better than he got. So anyway, when I warn you against making liquor at home, it's because I know what the consequences are. Actually, my family had grocery stores. We were some of the few people in the area licensed to sell beer and wine. And the local moonshiners didn't like that. And grew up with a lot of threats of violence, stories of violence, whether it was competing moonshiners or bootleggers. That was more an issue for the bootleggers because they were making money bringing beer and wine up the mountain to sell from, where it was legal to where it was not. But also corrupt politicians, a lot of corrupt and police, a lot of corrupt sheriffs out there and sheriff's deputies. And they were getting their cut from one and, they go after the other. And it can get pretty rough. It can get really, really rough. In fact, the movie Walking Tall was based on a true story, just kind of not far from where I grew up and with some of the same folks involved. And I could go a lot further in detail on that, but I won't because you learn as you grow up in that environment. There's some things you just don't talk about because if you do, somebody will burn your house down or run you off the road, off a cliff, which probably happened to one of my relatives. So, we'll move on now to a more pleasant subject. I do need to say one more thing about honeysuckle. Do not confuse it with Carolina jessamine or gelsemium. I've done a whole show on gelsemium. In flower, the two plants look nothing alike. When they're not in flower, they could be mistaken for each other if you're not really familiar with the leaf shape and size. The jessamine leaf is more, I think you would call it lanceolate. It's more pointed. I can tell the difference when they're not in flower. I can look at one, but I've been dealing with this stuff for years. Jessamine is an extremely useful herb. Gelsemium, I've done a whole show on it. It is a strong narcotic. It affects the central nervous system as powerfully as, say, morphine. But it's not an opiate. And people should be researching it as an alternative to help people who are addicted to opiates. or as for its pain relieving properties. But it is so extremely dangerous that if you tried to use it, as I just described honeysuckle, one sip of it would probably stop your heart and kill you. I mean, it is very, very potent, powerful herb that is really common. It's actually the state flower of South Carolina, so don't be afraid of it, but don't let your kids eat it, and don't mistake it for honeysuckle. And like I said, when it's in flower, you can definitely tell the difference. Beautiful flower, by the way. I grow jessamine. It's one of my, I grow it in pots in the mountains because it's too cold here. Bring them inside, set them back out in the spring. And it's one of the most useful herbs in my herbal medicine cabinet, but extremely dangerous if you don't know how to use it. It was discovered when someone made a tea of it by mistake and like went into a coma for about, I think, was it 8 days? And I mean, they could tell it looked like he was comatose, but his eyes were open. They were checking his heart rate. It was really slow, his respiration. Doctors are coming in. They're thinking the guy's near death, right? And eventually he recovers from it and described the experience as being like essentially having taken a lot of heroin. He almost overdosed, but said that all the pain he had been experiencing, and I think he had a bad rheumatoid arthritis, no pain, perfectly relaxed, peaceful feeling. So, I mean, it's a really powerful herb, but should really only be used by a professional. One little tiny bit, especially a tincture form, which is going to be a whole lot stronger than that tea he drank, could stop your heart and kill you. So I do need to give that warning. So we'll talk about one now that is super easy to use and absolutely not dangerous at all. And that's horseradish. And horseradish really grows rampantly in the garden. If you've ever grown it, it's one of those that just kind of takes over. And our ancestors, when they came here from especially European countries, grew horseradish, and it got out. And now we can find wild or truly feral horseradish throughout most of the eastern United States, and probably most of the western United States, but especially east of the Mississippi. You're probably not going to find it a lot in the plains and deserts, though you might, actually. Certainly in the Midwest, especially up in the northern parts of the Midwest, you're going to find tons of horseradish. And you get to the West Coast, and horseradish is, of course, very popular among Asian folks, too. They have their own varieties. You probably find a couple varieties of horseradish out there. So probably very few places in America it doesn't grow. And the same would be true of Canada, as essentially a wild plant now. The root can be used anytime you want to make a condiment. I mean, I love prepared horseradish. I just take that horseradish root, grate it up. I don't have a formal recipe on this. I just grate it as much as I think I'm going to use and mix in some salt and vinegar. And that's it. It'll keep for months like that in the refrigerator. If you buy horseradish prepared from the store, that's essentially what you got. Now, you can absolutely add some other herbs to it. You can... you can make it as aromatic and interesting as you want. A little mustard mixed with horseradish is always very good. A little mayonnaise, really the dip I use for fried mushrooms, and a lot of the wild plants that I talk about battering and frying is mayonnaise, whether it's homemade or store-bought, really doesn't matter to me. I'll prefer homemade, but you do what you like. Mayonnaise, spoonful or two of horseradish, maybe a dash of hot sauce, maybe, but definitely a little bit of mustard and a little Worcestershire sauce. That's it. Worcestershire sauce, it just gives it that nice flavor. And I just batter and fry my mushrooms or whatever else I'm frying, fiddlehead, ferns, whatever. Squash, I love squash, summer squash especially, battered and fried. But just dip it in that sauce is fantastic. Really, really good. Good on a lot of things. You can use that on a burger, whatever. You can make it as a cocktail sauce by adding a lot of dill to it. Really good with fried seafood. I'd probably leave out the Worcestershire that time, but yeah, some lemon juice, and lemon juice is good any way you look at it in there. But some dill will make you that's what I'm trying to remember. Some pickle relish. Yeah, just a little bit of pickle relish mixed in there. Make a nice cocktail sauce for fried seafood. And of course, horseradish is medicinal. It clears the sinuses. It actually has some antiviral properties, real good to know. Leaves of horseradish, this is something most people don't know, can actually be used as a salad green. Add them to salads in the early spring, or you can cook them as you would mustard. It's in the same family. It's in the same family as broccoli and mustard and collards and all that. So you can absolutely use it as a pot herb. But by the summer, the leaves are probably a little too tough. But they're actually so tough, you can use them to make cordage with. You can actually make rope out of horseradish leaves. Another great way to use horseradish is to ferment it. Sort of like a kimchi. This is like a crazy mix that I came up with. This is not a traditional kimchi like you would get in Korea, but I used a lot of the same flavors one day, just throwing it together. Stinks when it's fermenting. Oh my gosh, it's horrible. But after a week or so, the smell goes away. Let it ferment until it gets about sour enough for your taste. And I am telling you, this stuff is fantastic. It is the best thing on a hot dog I have ever had. And I am not kidding you. This stuff is amazing, okay? And this is a punch in the mouth of flavor. So let's chop some cabbage, grate some carrots, or, chop it however you like it. I usually just julienne things, but, I might grate it for this. Same with radish, onion, fresh hot pepper, grated horseradish. And I use a significant amount of horseradish in this. Grated ginger, grated turmeric, crushed garlic, crushed red pepper, black pepper, salt, dried mustard, dark mushroom soy sauce if you can find it. I can't seem to find it in the stores anymore. Otherwise, just use regular soy sauce. Some fish sauce. Get some fish sauce from the Thai aisle. There's several brands that are good. They're very funky. And a little kombucha to get the fermentation going. I make about a gallon or so at a time, and it's just proportions depending on your taste and how much you're making. But, I'll start with maybe 1 head of cabbage, 2 onions, a whole head of garlic. I like a lot of garlic in there. So put your big head of garlic down on the counter and smack it with the heel of your hand. That will break open all the cloves. All right. Then take your knife and crush them, and the skins will come off very easily, especially if you kind of cut the stem end and then crush them with your knife. Another way you can do it is take 2 metal bowls, put your garlic in there that has not been peeled, put 1 bowl on top so it's sealed, right? And shake it vigorously, and the peels will come off. So anyway, you're going to want this garlic crushed though, so I'm just going to go ahead and crush it with my knife and just rough chop through it. I'm going to say just a bunch of carrots. It could be 3 to 6 or 8, depending on the size you've got and your taste. Ditto on a bunch of radishes. If you were going with more of a Korean flavor, you might want to use a big daikon. But I just grab a bunch of radishes. I would use several jalapenos or habanero peppers because I like things really hot. And just chop all those vegetables, grind them, grate them, whatever you want to do. Put them in a bowl or a crock. With your hands, work in about 4 tablespoons of non-iodized salt. Work it into the vegetables are bruised and soft, and there's a lot of brine, actually enough brine to cover the vegetables that come up from it. Pack it into the crock. Put in about a half a cup of plain sour kombucha. This is optional, okay? But that's going to ensure a fast and successful fermentation. You're not going to have to worry about any mold or anything. The kombucha will take over. Otherwise, it will naturally ferment because of the salt on its own. But you're going to have to make sure all those vegetables are submerged under the water, nothing sticking up. And that's true with kombucha too. You don't want anything exposed to air. But you get a lot more wiggle room. There's a safety net with kombucha because it's going to ferment fast and it's going to ferment strong. It's going to cut the fermentation down by at least a half. So mix in all your spices and seasonings. And like I said, I'm going to like some ginger. I'm going to like some turmeric, mustard, fish sauce, and soy sauce and all that. But you do it to your taste. Pack tightly in a jar crock. Like I said, make sure everything's under the brine. Use some kind of fermentation lock or weight to keep the vegetables under the water. Easiest thing, as I've many times said, rubber glove with a rubber band holding in place over the top. The glove will inflate. It won't let air in. Do whatever you like. Depends on the size of the mouth of the jar or crock you're using and what you got. A lot of times I will use an airlock for making wine or beer. Anything works like that. But if it's a wide mouth crock, a plate will just keep things under the water. Just weight it down. Just press it down. Use what you got. Anything that'll it'll start bubbling. It's gassing off carbon dioxide. You gotta let that gas off without letting air in, which will have bacteria in it that can spoil your batch. But this has got so much garlic and onion and hot stuff and all that, and with a little kombucha, it's like honestly, I think of it as like a natural antibiotic. This stuff is like, it is the best cure for colds. It is the best cure for sinus congestion. And it's absolutely delicious if you like strong flavored foods. If you like hot relishes and chow chows, if you like Indian food, if you like Korean food, this is really, of course, based on Korean kimchi. This is a punch in the face. And it'll be ready in about a week, but it'll improve as time goes by. It's hot. And if you use habaneros or several jalapenos, it's going to be really hot. It's strong, it's a little sour, it's a little salty, it's a little funky with the fish sauce and soy sauce. It's full of antiseptic and antibiotic and antiviral herbs. Like I said, it's going to stink for a few days as the onions and garlic begin to ferment, but then it's going to mellow out. It's like 2 to 3 days. And it will take a little getting used to, and it does mellow a little over time. But if you like strong flavors and spicy food, you're going to love this stuff. And it is worth the stench to make it. It is so good. It is like mind-blowingly good. I started putting on top of hamburgers. I made some like really weird nachos with it one time. Like, anyway, like some kind of Korean inspired nachos I came up with. But on a hot dog, this will make you a hot dog fanatic if you like strong flavors. If you don't, I'm sorry. If you're not a fan of delicious flavor, as Sean used to say on the show Psych, that was a very funny little mystery show. If you're a fan of delicious flavor, you'll like it. And if you're, not, it'll probably be about the worst thing you've ever put in your mouth. So anyway, I'm just going to warn you. And you could definitely put some mushrooms in that. You get some mushrooms, you get some good antiviral, immune supportive properties. What you want to do in that case, boil the mushrooms first, parboil them, and then chop them and throw them in there. And they're going to ferment, but they do have to be cooked first. Otherwise, they're going to turn to mush. So any mushrooms you like, whether it's oysters, shiitakes, so many medicinal mushrooms, or lion's mane, or etc. You just blanch them or boil them for just a few minutes, really. Chop them up. They'll be nice and firm after boiling. Put them in there. They'll ferment. And you've just enhanced the medicinal value and the flavor with that, the good umami flavors of mushrooms beyond belief. And this stuff is addictive. You are going to get hooked on it. It's like, I can't leave home without my batch of Redneck Kimchi. That's what I call it, actually. I call it Redneck Kimchi because I just threw the stuff together one night. I was thinking, I got a taste for kimchi, but I don't have Korean pepper flakes or paste. I don't have, Asian cabbage or big daikon radishes. What can I do? And I thought, well, I can ferment it like sauerkraut. And now what flavors do I want? Well, I want ginger, and I want garlic, and I want turmeric, and I want a little mustard, and tons of hot peppers, and threw it together, and my gosh, did it work out well. That is truly one of the best things I've ever come up with. Like, you would think I don't even know, an insane drunken college student just cleared out the refrigerator and threw everything in a jar. But there was a method to my madness, and it turned out really good. Really good. Even though it smelled so bad for about 3 or 4 days, nobody could stand to be in the house. I literally had to move it out to the garage. It would probably drive bears away. It will make your eyes water. It's so strong. But after that, it mellows out. You're good to go. Keep it in the fridge, and a nice big batch will probably last you a year because, even as much as I like strong flavors, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons, about all I could stand at a serving. And I didn't get sick at all while I was eating that. It's like fire cider mixed with kimchi, mixed with sauerkraut. I don't even know. It is fantastic, actually. All right, so now we'll get on to the from my book Weeds and Grasses, Medicinal Weeds and Grasses in the American South. We're going to get into one of the most fascinating of all of the herbal families. It is Solanum. the Nightshade family. We're going to talk specifically about the ones that grow in my region, in most of North America. Solanum americanum, that is American black nightshade. Horse nettle, Solanum carolinensis, as you may have guessed. It grows a lot in the Carolinas. It's really everywhere. Solanum dulcamara, that's bitter nightshade or bittersweet. Probably the most useful of all of these. And Solanum nigrum, black nightshade, European black nightshade, etc. So, moving from last week, the Smilax family, that is so reasonably safe, to one that's so dangerous. I'm going to just give you some history and then we'll get into it. I am going to put the big disclaimer on this. Just like I said, don't use Gelsemium if you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to say for the most part, don't use these herbs at all, except topically, because they do have some very good uses topically. So, you may remember that Thomas Jefferson popularized the tomato. Why wouldn't Europeans eat tomatoes? Well, it's because it's a nightshade, and the nightshades that grow in Europe were often used by witches to make people think they were being chased by demons, or to think they were flying, or people would eat them and go insane and go on murderous rampages. They have hallucinogenic properties. That said, they are very useful medicinally, and while some are so deadly that they are absolutely poisonous enough to kill you, usually you go insane and then die. Don't forget, this is the same family that includes tomatoes and potatoes and eggplants. There are some that are safe, so don't get freaked out. Let's just take this as adults, okay? Dioscorides wrote of several members of the European nightshades, and some were poisonous. He called them strychnos, which is where we get the name strychnine. Okay, so very poisonous, but some were also good, useful vegetables, like eggplant. And he wrote a nice entry on eggplant. I'm not going to get into it, but along with it being a delicious edible, he found it was good for curing the ulcers of the eyes and for applied topically for skin eruptions and to dissolve inflammations. He said the juice was good against erysipelas and streptococcus and all kinds of that. Then he gets into another strychnos, which was also called hallicabum. I can't pronounce that, but it meant bad poison in Greek. So, I mean, even back then, it was known that some were edible and some were really, really bad. And it said it had round fruits, pods similar shape to a bladder, reddish round, smooth like the kernel of a grape. And the fruit taken in a drink is able to clean away urinary jaundice. The herb of them is juiced and dried in the shade for storage. But, of course, he warns that it's also very poisonous. Another one seems to be like deadly nightshade. This is one he called Strychnos somnificum, which apparently means it would make you sleep and poison you. And after describing it, he said the fruit is also good for the urinary. Decoction of 12 berries taken as a drink given for dropsy, but any more would induce fainting. Helped with a large quantity of honey taken as a drink. The juice of it mixed with medications and lozenges eases pain. Boiled in wine and held in the mouth, it helps toothache. We will get back to that again. This is what we call Jimson weed. Jimson weed is actually an old folk remedy for toothache that, if you survive it, would make your tooth stop hurting. So we'll get into that. It would also take away dullness of sight. It was also known as the name hallicabum, I think, bad poison. And he talks about another one. We don't need to get into all that. Pliny the Elder, apparently is how you pronounce it. Talked about strychnine, the same family, and he seems to talk about one that may be a woody nightshade, and he said, however, a few drops of the juice are in fact quite sufficient to produce insanity. So there you have it. You may have heard of it being called belladonna. Well, the reason it's called belladonna is that women used to use it to make their pupils dilate, to give them big, pupils, which they thought was pretty. That means pretty lady. I'm not sure why anyone thinks dilated pupils are more attractive than non-dilated pupils. I mean, I guess the ancient Greeks were a lot like the acid heads in the 60s. So anyway, but he talks about steeping it in wine and various uses. This is all very dangerous. So I'm not going to give you any real specific uses until we get to modern use. Right now, I'm just giving you sort of a historical overview, okay? Gerard wrote The Nightshade, and he quotes Galen saying that is used for those infirmities that have need of cooling and binding, but not good for nourishment. He said, well, he quotes Dioscorides, and he said it was good against St. Anthony's fire. Now, that's shingles, and that is a very, as I said, all of these are very good topically, and what they help do is disrupt sort of the pain signals being sent by the nerves. So these are actually some of our very, very, very best remedies for shingles, for nerve pain in the feet and legs, for instance, for rabies, for scabies, for mange in animals. In fact, the Carolina nightshade, the horse nettle, Native Americans used it very much for their animals that had scabies or mange. Lots of interesting uses. Like I said, I'm mainly going to talk about it being used topically in modern use. And he recommended taking the juice of the green leaves of garden nightshade, whichever one that was, and mixing it with barley meal and applied topically to St. Anthony's fire or shingles. He said the juice of it mixed with oil of roses and a few other things was also good. And he said neither the juice thereof nor any part is given inwardly because it may be dangerous. So I'll just put it that way. It says the bark of the sleepy nightshade. We're going to assume that was the one. What was it, Solanum not Solanum. It was the something that sounded like somniferous or somniflorum. Probably somniflorum. The one that I said would cause fainting has a somniferous quality. There we go. That means it helps you sleep. And was milder than opium, he thought. Opium was used as a sleep aid back in the 1500s. And but as Pliny saith, the remedies thereof are of not such esteem that we should long insist upon them, because there are other medicines that are less harmful for serving the same purpose. Now we get up to Culpeper. About 100 years later, he said the common nightshade is wholly used to cool hot inflammations either inwardly or outwardly, being no ways dangerous to any in that use, as most of the rest of the nightshades are. Yet it must be used moderately, and he just says common nightshade. He said the juice taken being mingled with a little vinegar is good to wash the mouth and throat that is inflamed. Be very careful with that. The juice taken of the herb with berries of oil of rose and a little vinegar pounded together in a mortar is good for all hot inflammation of the eyes, also good for shingles, ringworms, and all running, fretting, and corroding ulcers applied thereunto. He mentions that Pliny said it was good for hot swellings in the throat. Have a care you mistake not. In other words, don't mistake the deadly nightshade for this. If you know it not, let them both alone, and take no harm, having other medicines sufficient in this book. So I mean, that's another. Every one of the authors warns. Okay, specifically bittersweet. So I guess he was talking about a different one. He gives some odd, we'll say odd, uses. He says that it's exceedingly good to remove witchcraft in men and beasts. So here's Culpeper, the Protestant herbalist of the 1600s, who was always condemning Catholics for being superstitious, who used bittersweet to remedy against spells. So there you go. There you have it. There's your modern English herbalist right there. 1600s people. Anyway, he was quite superstitious. He was very into astrology and different things. And he said people in Germany commonly hang it about their cattle's necks, for fear any such evil hath betided them. So, but anyway, he said the berries were good to use for felons or sores on the hands. And he says, we have now showed you the external use of the herb, and will speak a word or two of the internal, and so conclude. Take notice, however, this is a mercurial herb, and therefore of very subtle parts, as indeed all mercurial plants are. Take a pound of wood and leaves together, bruise the wood, for it is not as hard as oak, and then put in a pot and put in 3 pints of white wine. Put the lid on the pot, close it shut, infuse over a gentle fire for 12 hours, then strain it out so you have an excellent drink to open obstructions of the liver and spleen and help difficulty of breath, bruises and falls, congealed blood in many parts of the body. It helps with yellow jaundice, the dropsy, the black jaundice, and cleanse women newly brought to bed. You may drink a quarter of a pint, let's be clear about that, of the infusion every morning. It purges the body very gently, not churlishly, as some hold. And when you find good by this, remember me. Okay. As I said, bittersweet is one of the least dangerous. I would still be very careful with this. And remember, this is from the 1600s, and take this with a strong grain of salt. Okay. Of the berry-bearing Solanum, it had been called an aconite. You know, aconite is wolf's hood or monk's hood or wolf's bane, which is so strongly narcotic it will slow and stop your heart with just a few drops. So he's warning against that one. And of the berry-bearing Solanum, that's the one we know as belladonna. And belladonna, yes, is the one that the women use to make their eyes dilate for odd reasons. And he's warning here that it is as deadly as aconite. So I'm not kidding y'all when I tell you got to be very careful with these. But he says that Parkinson, the greatest of the British herbalists, used it. Okay, he said Parkinson says the roots boiled in wine help with colic, and the leaves applied outwardly repress tumors and inflammation, especially the scrotum and testicles, and ripen pestilent tumors. He also mentions that although it had been called an aconite before, it could actually be used as a counter poison. And was good in malignant and pestilential fevers. I'm not going to recommend it at all. Now, we're going to get into more modern use. In the 1930s, at least, in the British tradition still, Miss Greaves talks about Solanum nigrum. So we know for sure this is the black nightshade. And she describes it, very common in Scotland and south of England, apparently. And she says also called the garden nightshade. So, okay, that clears up a little bit about what Gerard said when he referred to garden nightshade. He meant the black nightshade, Solanum nigrum, which you're going to probably find growing pretty commonly in America as well. After describing it in quite a bit of detail, because you don't want to confuse these, she said in the 14th century it was known under the name of petit moral and was used for canker sores mixed with horehound. It was taken in wine for dropsy. Part used whole plant, gathered in autumn when flower and fruit can be dried, and also the fresh leaves in other times of the year. When the plant, she talks about harvesting. All right, medicinal uses. This species has a reputation of being very poisonous, a fact, however, disputed by recent inquiries. In experimentation on dogs, she must have been a proto-Anthony Fauci that was participating. Varying results have been attained, which may be explained by the fact of the active principle solanine, on which the poisonous properties of this and preceding species depend, and which exists in considerable property in the fresh herb, varies very much at different seasons. The berries are injurious to children, but have often been eaten by adults with impunity, especially when quite ripe, as the poisonous principle is chiefly associated with the green parts. Cattle will not eat the plant, and sheep rarely touch it. She said it is applied medicinally similarly to bittersweet, but is more powerful and possesses greater narcotic properties. According to Withering and authorities, 1 or 2 grains of the dried leaves infused in boiling water is a strong sudorific. In Bohemia, leaves are placed in the cradles of infants to promote sleep. Probably rather dangerous. It had some SIDS going on there, I would imagine. In the Isle of Bourbon, and the leaves are eaten in place of spinach. Again, that doesn't sound very safe. It has been found useful in cutaneous disorders, that means skin disorders, but its action is variable and is considered a somewhat dangerous remedy except in very small doses. The bruised leaves used externally are said to ease pain and abate inflammation. The Arabs apply them to burns and ulcers. The juice has been used for ringworm, gout, earache, and mixed with vinegar is said to be a good gargle and mouthwash. And then she mentions various other varieties of Solanum that can be used similarly, that grow everywhere from Brazil to Spain, all over the place. Belladonna, particularly, she says, though widely distributed over Central and Southern Europe, the plant is not common in England. And she gets into a great deal of history about belladonna that I'm not going to get into it. She said that one interesting note, though, is that belladonna is supposed to be the plant that poisoned the troops of Marcus Antonius and during the Parthian Wars. Plutarch gave this account of the strange effects that followed its use. Apparently they hallucinated a lot before they died. So we'll keep going on down here. Mandrake, also very common in Europe, not in America, unless strictly Medicinal Herbs sells it. If you want to try growing mandrake, not a good idea unless you want to think you're flying. That was what was used in witches' potions or being chased by demons. Let's see. She says that belladonna often confused with bittersweet because they both bear the popular name of woody nightshade, so very important to tell these plants apart. Belladonna was a very popular herb at one point, and there may have even been some wars fought over it. She gives a great deal of information about how to grow it and when to harvest it. It's a very long entry actually on belladonna, which is not an herb we use much anymore because, like I said, it is quite toxic. The medicinal properties of belladonna depend on the presence of histamine and atropine. And you may know that atropine has somewhat of a paralyzing type effect. Medicinal uses: narcotic, diuretic, sedative, antispasmodic. Belladonna is a most valuable plant in the treatment of eye diseases. Atropine obtained during the extraction being its most important constituent of its power of dilating the pupil. Atropine will have this effect in whatever way it is used, whether internally or injected in the skin, but when dropped into the eye, a much smaller quantity suffices. She talks about how the eye doctors of her time would use it. They don't really use it anymore, obviously. It is an antidote to opium. Atropine, being injected subcutaneously, has been used in poisonings by calabar bean and chloroform poisoning. It has no action on the voluntary muscles, but the nerve endings in involuntary muscles are paralyzed by large doses. Paralysis finally affecting the central nervous system causing excitement and delirium. Various preparations of belladonna have many uses, and I could get into all that. Small doses may allay cardiac palpitation, and this is actually used externally as a plaster in the cardiac region. It's a powerful antispasmodic. It has been useful in intestinal colic and spasmodic asthma. Yes, some of these plants, folk use, are smoked, actually, Jimson weed being one of them, to relieve spasmodic asthma. Not safe, but people in the mountains used to do that all the time. And it was even when I was working in a drugstore in my teens, early 20s, the old mountain men would come in looking for asthma cigarettes, which had a solanum in there, usually derived from Jimson weed, that would help with spasmodic asthma. Apparently they were quite effective, but they're not made or commercially anymore. If that's something we'll get into that actually as we go on. This actually may have to be a two-parter. Yeah, we're going to have to make this a two-parter. After I wrap up with Miss Grieve, we'll be about an hour into this show. So next week, we'll continue with it. It's a big and important family of herbs to know. All right, Solanum dulcamara. She said bears a certain resemblance. Solanum dulcamara, which is bittersweet, leaves bear a resemblance to belladonna, and both the flowers of bittersweet and belladonna are purple. And the berries both have berries, but bittersweet's berries are red. That's how we really identify this plant, not black like belladonna. And also known as woody nightshade. That was one of the names used earlier, which I thought I was right on that. She said the older physicians valued bittersweet highly and applied it in many purposes in medicines and surgery for which it is no longer used. It was in great repute as far back as the time of Theophrastus, and it was used in England as far back as the 13th century. Much used by the Dutch. Says bittersweet contains the alkaloid solanine and the amorphous glucoside dulcamerine. Solanine acts narcotically in large doses. It paralyzes the central nervous system without affecting the peripheral nerves or voluntary muscles. It slows heart rate and respiration, lessens sensibility, lowers the temperature, and causes vertigo and delirium, terminating in death with convulsions if you use too much, obviously. She says the drug possesses feeble narcotic properties, so it's not as strong as belladonna. With the power of increasing secretions, particularly those of the skin and kidneys, it has no action on the pupil of the eyes, also very different than belladonna. It is chiefly used as an alternative in skin diseases. It's used topically for skin diseases, being a popular remedy for obstinate skin eruptions, scrofula, and ulcers. It has also been recommended in chronic bronchial catarrh, asthma, and whooping cough. And for chronic rheumatism and jaundice, it's been used as an infusion. It's basically like a tea, very, very small doses though, and I'm not recommending it. The berries has proved poisonous to a certain degree in children. Other species that were used in her time are Solanum arabenta from Rio de Janeiro, Solanum mimosum, Solanum oleracea, and Solanum pseudocapsicum. All right, and we will stop with the English tradition there. Next week's going to be a very interesting show. We're going to get into the American tradition of using these herbs. We're going to go back to the Thompsonians. We're going to talk about Native American use. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, resources of southern fields and forests, and we're going to get into modern use as well. Like I said, the Solanum family of these herbs, these hallucinogenic herbs, poisonous herbs, are very little used in modern medicine today. However, if you go and get many topical creams that are very popular these days for nerve pain, you're going to see a couple in there. Used topically, they do help deaden out that nerve pain. I'm using one right now for sciatic pain, and it works wonderfully. And you can actually make these yourself. And boy, when we get into some of the anecdotes in history from early America, you'd be very interested in these plants. It would be very hard to separate this family of plants from human history. I mean, as I said, medicinally, once very much used in herbal medicine. Much used by witches and sorcerers to so-called cast spells on people. So a lot of our folklore, a lot of our stories of witches and ghosts and such come from this plant. Culinarily, one of the most important species of plants, families of plants, I should say, in the entire world. I mean, these are our tomatoes and potatoes and eggplants and peppers. All your bell peppers, hot peppers are all in this family. Bittersweet, one of the most popular plants for basket weaving. These plants have been incorporated with human history in just about every part of the world for as long as mankind's been around. Given their toxic potential, while they're not much used anymore in herbal medicine, internally at least, very important that you be able to identify these plants so your kids don't eat them or you don't pick the wrong berries and die. So we're going to keep on this one for a couple of days. We're getting into some really fascinating anecdotes and stories and uses, and I think you're going to really enjoy this one. But I am going to have to wrap it up here. I'd hope to do this in one day, but I'm actually only about halfway through the Solanum family. And we'll pick it up next week. Y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.